Okay, welcome to this week's episode of Life Redefined. And this one is all about future tripping. And you're probably like, what exactly do you mean by future tripping? So, if you haven't heard this term, it is essentially when you are constantly thinking about and worrying about things that are going to be happening in the future. So basically, if you are one of those people that constantly gets caught up in all of those what if situations, like what if I don't get that job? Or what if I screw up in this meeting? Or what if I have XYZ go wrong in my pregnancy? Or what if it doesn't turn out the way that I thought? Or what if this certain situation doesn't go as planned? Like all of these different situations that we can get so caught up and wrapped up in when more or less either a cue, a trigger, or like a circumstance happens that could potentially set off that trajectory of all of those what if situations. So, the reason why I wanted this to be a topic this week is because I realized in my 4 or 5 weeks right now of collecting data on my own behaviors. And I'll just take a moment now to say if you have not listened to the past 5 episodes, all on the mini series of how to build sustainable behavior change, I highly recommend you go and listen to all of that journey of me tracking and following along and sharing all of my insight on me tracking my behaviors and really establishing habits and how to really maintain them and work through them. So, highly recommend listening to that mini series. And through this journey of me tracking and reflecting and over time seeing what works for me and what doesn't and building my skills and adjusting as I'm navigating these new behaviors that I want to incorporate in my day-to-day, I realized mainly because one of the values that I am currently desiring to embody more of is being present. And I realized in this process is that my main coping mechanism when I am feeling uncomfortable, when I feel terrified, when I have a fear come up, when something happens, I tend to freeze. And that is my typical um, nervous system response is it's not a fight, it's not a flight, it is a freeze. And I would typically shut down, avoid, not respond, and just, go inward and just really try to numb out essentially. And a lot of the time in that process, I would go inward, but what I would distract myself with is just getting sucked into my thoughts and feelings and going down rabbit holes. And I started to realize when something specifically happens, my brain is already like 10 steps ahead. So, like, if something happens at work, my brain is already thinking about the next 10 steps of how to problem solve that, how to fix that, how to manage that, what to do, what not to do, what is it going to look like? What if it doesn't look like that way? Like, you get what I'm saying. So, I realized whenever I was like going through the specific behaviors that I was tracking, I realized that I wasn't being consistent with being present because I didn't give myself the time of day to like be mindful and connect with myself. And in that process, I realized that I actually was constantly living in the future. And this was a really cool realization because I didn't see it that way before. Like before, I was like, oh, I'm so frustrated that I'm not being mindful. Oh, I'm so frustrated that I'm not as present. I'm so mindful that I just like I shut down and I don't really connect with myself and I don't give myself the time of day. Like I would just, I'd be focusing on the fact that I didn't engage in the present moment. And from this whole process of like tracking this behavior and my value of being present, I I was consistently reflecting, right, in that process. And so I was able to look at it and ask myself on a daily and weekly basis, reflecting and saying, okay, if that's what happened in that moment, why was that? And instead of engaging in that behavior, what was I doing instead? And when I actually like paused and thought about it, I was like, oh my God. In all of those situations when I would like shut down, avoid, and like not attend to anything in my surroundings, what I was doing instead was constantly thinking about everything else in the future. All of those what if scenarios for so many different things. And it's 100% like a snowball effect. Like once you think of one situation, then sometimes you jump to another and then you think of the next 10 steps for that. But then that's connected to something else in your life. So then you're like down the rabbit hole of another 10 what if scenarios. Like my brain seeks certainty. And this is something that I'm realizing, or just in general, that when we think about like survival and desiring to be able to make the life that we want, and be able to pursue things, our brain's natural evolutionary instinct to keep us alive and survive, if we think of like cave people, like our brain still operates that way. Our brain, to survive back in the day, needed to think 10 steps ahead to literally survive any dangerous situations. And that is something I'm like just really allowing myself to connect with, because I'm not in a dangerous situation. Me thinking about the what if of this one situation at work is not a life or death situation. And majority of the time, speaking on this, uh, you know, majority of we're not being mauled by a bear every day, right? Like we are not in that constant 100% dangerous situation. And our brains can get so wrapped up in trying to build that certainty and build that immense amount of predictability to keep us safe. And that is what our brain was built to do. So, and I talked about this two episodes, I believe, in the fourth episode in the mini series about progress over time. And I talked a lot about your past and your present and your future. And this is kind of that same topic. And so really thinking about it in a deeper context is, if I think about when I'm in the present moment and I engage in certain behaviors, I, one, would get frustrated at myself and be like, why do I still do this? And I revert back and think back to like, these are my past behaviors that I no longer want to be doing. But my brain then goes to this place of like, but I want it to be this way. I want to do that. And like, what if I just did this, this, and this to get there? Or what if this bad thing happened and that ultimately is the reason why I'm holding back or why I'm not achieving certain things? And so when it comes to future tripping in, in psychology, it's called anticipatory anxiety. So you are you are building up this anxiety because you're anticipating something that has never happened. And this is something that I'm realizing has been a massive component to my my learning history and my behavior process and how to navigate changing my behaviors. Because, like, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of like different scenarios. Like if at work you find out you get a new boss and you're like, oh my gosh, what if this boss is mean? What if this boss doesn't like me? What if this boss isn't as flexible as my previous boss? Like, how am I going to manage that? And it's like all of these things that are completely out of our control, right? And there's this element of control and really realizing that that anticipation of what could happen or what is, you know, what your brain is creating all these scenarios about what would be happening in the future is, as I said, your brain's trying to build that predictability so that you can have a sense of control. And something I really want you to pause and really connect with in this, if you identify or feel like this is you, as I'm speaking to all of these scenarios, and you're like, yep, I definitely worry about all of those XYZ scenarios and create that in my head. I really want you to pause and connect with the things that you do have control in your environment. And I think the biggest question to ask yourself in this moment, if you are constantly worrying about the future, there is a massive element here that you are seeking control in your life. And you think that if you think your way into some intense plan, that everything will go smoothly. But at the end of the day, we cannot control the future. We cannot control anything that's external from us. The only thing we can control is how we respond to it. So if there's certain things that are going on in our life, if we have a new boss at work, if we get pregnant, if we, change careers, if we have a tough situation with a friend and we don't know how to handle it and we're thinking about a million ways to answer that conversation, like these, like if we're really diving into all these different scenarios of, oh my gosh, I'm now going down the rabbit hole of all of what could be, we can't control all of those things. So one of the biggest questions to ask yourself in this moment, if you're future tripping, is, what does being in control mean to me? And vice versa, if you're to actually also ask yourself, what does it mean of being not in control to me? Because that is something that I'm currently really moving through and realizing is that for me, being in control does feel like safety. Being in control feels like I have my shit together. Being in control makes me feel like I have a sense of accomplishment. And then when I think of being out of control, I feel not good enough. I feel like I'm not doing enough. If I feel out of control, I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I am lacking clarity, right? Like, and if you actually look at those pieces, it made me realize that's not true about being in control versus not. And I put a lot of negative things attached to being out of control. And it made me realize, like, we can only be in control of our own response to the circumstances that we are in. And so so it's basically allowing yourself to answer those questions and then redefine how I want to see connecting with this element of control, because I want to be in control of the actions I decide to take. I want to be in control of navigating not those anxious thoughts, like not trying to control those anxious thoughts, but being with them. That to me, like, this is my new version of like redefining control in my life in a new way that allows me to connect with the present moment. Because when we focus so deeply on the future and what could be, and allowing ourselves to go down that rabbit hole of what if everything goes wrong, or what if all these scary things happen, or what if there's a bad situation, our brains are built for survival and a negativity biased. And so that's natural. That's common. And so I just want to say, like, if you are somebody that is really relating to this and you're like, yep, I future trip a lot, I am right there with you. But so is so many other people. This is such a common thing. It is natural for your brain to go down that rabbit hole of what ifs, because that is what it was evolutionarily built to do. Our brains were built for cave people survival, like life or death survival. So if you feel as though you are constantly future tripping, I want you to really put this into perspective and think about how much it is removing you from your current life, your current situations, your current beauty, the current things that you are embodying, the current habits you are engaging in, and really allow yourself to take ownership of that current you. Because a secondary element to this whole like future tripping is that I started to place responsibility on future me. Like if I wanted something to happen 2 weeks from now, I kept telling myself, oh, I have time to do that. Oh, I don't need to stress about that right now. Oh, it's all good. Like I kept punting that responsibility onto future me. And current me was like, I don't want to deal with this. And so this is kind of like a secondary layer of it when it comes to your actions. So future tripping is thinking, that thought process of all the what ifs, but that tends to lead to avoidance or distraction or numbing out or, basically avoiding those daily responsibilities in your current day, in that current moment. And that can also really affect your relationships. And, you're taking yourself out of the equation of connecting with those around you. If you're so fixated on all these other things that are in the future that are not even happening right now. And so I say that these are all connected because my thoughts were driving me to focus on future situations and stress about those and have anxiety about those. But then when it came to taking action, my brain was still jumping to the future to be like, oh, you don't need to stress about that right now. Oh, you don't need to do that right now. Oh, you can snooze 5 times. Like I kept putting everything on future me. And then when that future moment came, I was so stressed out. I was even more overwhelmed. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because then when that time comes, you're like, see, it is stressful. It is happening the way that I thought and worried about. Right. And so we have to stop that in our tracks and say, okay, I am stressing about the future right now, but current me is safe. Current me is okay in this moment. I might have a lot of these thoughts, but that is okay. I don't need to act on them. I don't need to avoid my current day because of them. And I've spoken about this in a few past episodes, but like getting out of the box or an all or nothing thinking and really connecting to that power of and. Like I can have these, scary what if thoughts and I can still continue and be present in my current day. And I wanted this to just be this episode because this is something that I'm currently going through and moving through. And I just wanted to share a couple tactical tips for you if you are feeling like this is something you're navigating right now. And one of the best things that has really supported me, because this is another layer, is because my mind, like my brain just wants to jump to future events, even if it's not a negative thing per se, but my brain is just so attracted to being focused on the future that like I don't even know what day it is. You know what I mean? Like if I have an event next Sunday, okay, my brain is like, what do I do? What do I got to do for that event? Where do I have to be? What should I wear? What is this thing? And then, oh, a week and a half later, I'm going to that dinner. Okay, it's with these people. And my brain is constantly looking like I'm a visual person. So my brain will constantly be like visualizing and thinking about like all of these future events that I have in my calendar. And it completely makes me miss out on the current day and the current moment. So there's a few layers to this future tripping. It's not just about thinking and catastrophizing about future scenarios if something in particular, happens or you start thinking or stressing about something, but it's also about that fact that just like in general in your day to day, if you're constantly focusing on how busy you are or what is in your calendar or how are these events going to go, or, focusing on all of those factors can really make us become even more stressed and overwhelmed and anxious if we don't allow ourselves to pause and really get into the present moment. So the one thing that has been really helping me, and it sounds so, so simple, but it has really helped my brain, because my brain literally will jump to days from now and weeks from now thinking about all the things I need, quote unquote, need to do. And in those moments when I catch myself going down that rabbit hole, I pause. If I can walk to the bathroom and look in the mirror, this is also very beneficial, but I will pause in that moment and I will say, Sonia, today is Monday, May 22nd at 5 p.m. And when I allow myself to pause and get present with the physical like date of today, it brings me back into the present moment. And in those moments, I can then look at my surrounding, and start to get connected with my senses, which I feel like are typical strategies that you might hear of, connecting with the five senses, looking at your surroundings, like connecting with your environment. But in relation to like that future tripping, I noticed when I thought about this, I was like, wow, I realize most of the time, like, I don't know what day it is. Like, I don't know. Is it May 16th? Is it April 10th? Like what day is it today? Like so many of the times I'm looking at my calendar and checking in on like the tasks or events that I'm going to be going to. And I don't even think about like today. So there's so many times where I get caught up. So I would say that is like my number one tactical supportive thing. If you are constantly feeling like you're stuck in the future, pause, say the current date to yourself. And what would be even better is saying out loud the current date along with what you see and along with what you smell and along with what you hear. You're connecting the current, like you're time stamping that moment with the senses so that you can allow yourself to connect with that moment. And if possible, you can add some additional tips there by calling someone and talking about what's going on with you, or going for a walk and really connecting. And, a bonus there is getting into nature on that walk. So those are some things about how to connect with the present moment when you are feeling like you are constantly future tripping. And one of the bigger, more common tips is, if you're constantly feeling like you're saying, what if this bad thing is going to happen? You can actively practice supporting your brain and teaching your brain the skill of actually getting curious and saying, what if a good thing happens instead? What if my boss is amazing? What if my pregnancy is, there are challenges, but I'm able to conquer them? What if I have some challenging conversations with people and I'm really proud of myself that I moved through them? Like, we're not going to be able to switch it to a what if a perfect situation happens, because we're not out here to be perfect. And we really have to allow ourselves to tap into the positive aspects of life, because our brain is wired to seek out negativity in the sense of pure survival. So we have to realize that, like, that is our brain's mechanism to keep us safe, So we have to acknowledge that negativity, embrace it, and accept it, that isn't going to 100% ever go away, but we can choose how we respond to those fears and worries about the future. And we can, you know, either connect with the present moment, or we can get curious about those thoughts and say, you know what? What if something even better happens in these situations? And that is a skill. That is a cognitive, mindful skill that we can teach and teach our brains to do whenever these thoughts come up. And it is not just a one and done, right? Like, this is something that we would have to practice over and over again whenever these moments happen, so that our brain can continue to feel safe when uncertainty happens, when there is an unknown and our brain's like, oh God, like, I don't know what's going to happen. Giving ourselves that space to say, hey, it's okay if I don't know. And I know that I can handle and do hard things if shit hits the fan. You know what I mean? Like, giving ourselves that grace. And this is the wild part. When I think about it, like, this is another tactic, or like a helpful tip as well, is like, think about all the times that you have had a challenging situation and you handled it and you were able to like manage it. Thinking about gathering the evidence that supports the fact that like you have handled so much in your life and in the past. So why go down that rabbit hole of those thoughts when nothing has even happened yet? Because for me, when I think about it, I'm like, oh, when there's chaos, like, I actually am pretty cool, calm, and collected, and I can actually manage it really well. So, like, why is my brain constantly putting me in that space of living in the future and stressing about the future, when in reality, when I actually look back and gather that evidence of times that I've had stressful situations, I've actually handled them really well. So, like, I don't need to go down that rabbit hole. I don't need to create that snowball effect. I can actually pick up that tiny snowball before it gets bigger, and I can hold it and I can, throw it in the air and see it break into a million little snowflakes, right? We don't need it to become a catastrophized situation. It's not about controlling or fixing or changing those thoughts, but it's about when those thoughts and feelings come up about future tripping and all those what ifs, it's how you choose to respond to it and connect and really be able to support yourself through that. So I hope this was helpful. And if you feel like that you resonate with this, send me a DM on Instagram at soniajmac.coaching. And I always love connecting with all of you that listen. And I appreciate you all so very much. And I hope you all have an amazing rest of the week. And I will see you guys next week.